Hello, listeners or viewers, if you're watching live on YouTube. And by the way, that's probably the first time I've mentioned that at the beginning of the episode. So you can also watch these in video format and see Claire's fabulous hair, by the way.
Thanks.
That was and so yes, today I am joined by Claire. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Clare Mullen. I'm Global VP of People at Scan.com. I've been in the people and talent industry for, I actually can't even remember how many years now, but I've spent the last sort of 10 years working particularly within the tech startup scale-up space.
Yes, thanks so much for being here, Claire. So one of the big things that Claire and I spoke about in advance was this idea or this expectation almost of HR people to be all knowing in all areas. So tell me a little bit about what your experiences has been as a HR leader, as a HR consultant, as head of team in terms of that feeling like you should be the expert of everything. And is it coming from us? Is it coming from the people around us? Is it coming from society? Like, where do you think it's coming from?
Oh gosh, I think from all places. I mean, I think that HR as a subject has had a reputation of being like the rule setters.
Mm.
It's seen as a function that is there to protect the business and not the employee. I think it's often a dumping ground for problem solving. So if you don't know where to put it, it probably lives in HR. Uh, I think HR functions can often be set up for failure from the start. And it covers such a wide range of topics that there's no way that we can be experts in every single one of those. And often I think that leaders and founders don't recognize that we might be an expert in a couple of things, but we might still need to go out and grab that expertise for a few others. I'm not an employment lawyer. I don't live in employment law every day. If I did, I'd be out there being an employment lawyer and earning that salary. And if you are in an HR function where you're having to live in that day in, day out, then I would suggest there's probably something deeply wrong with that organization. That's what you're having to do. So we're expected to be the problem solvers for everything, all knowing and not able to make mistakes.
Yes. Expected to be the problem solvers and all knowing and able to make mistakes. That this sounds like really hard. You mentioned, we're almost set up to fail.
Mm.
So that explains it pretty well. But also, even, and I mean, you and I spoke about this even before people, like what happens before HR people are brought in, or when are we bringing HR people in, and how does that
Yeah.
impact how we are set up to fail, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no magic formula as to when you bring that first HR person into the business. I actually used to say before I started my consultancy, I used to say it's 30 headcount. I don't know really where I got that number from. There's no science behind that. But in the time that I was then consulting, I was seeing more and more businesses bring that HR hire on, very early stages, sometimes pre-seed, when it's just a handful of people. The reality is you should bring that person on as soon as you can realistically afford to do that. It doesn't have to be that you're bringing that person on full time. In fact, there's a good argument for not. And it probably should be someone that can do, the HR and the talent attraction. But the earlier that you bring that person in, the better. Like when we spoke, I spoke about often, people bring that hire in when the building is on fire. There's very little I can do when everything is ablaze. If it's a small bin fire, then I can put that out and stop any further fires from happening. But don't bring us in when everything has gone wrong and expect us to be the magic fix.
I love what you shared there, because I think for anyone listening, what you've offered is like really practical for solutions, which is one, the idea that you can bring someone in sooner and it doesn't have to be a full-time role. So
Yeah,
if you're listening and you're thinking, I would like that support, but we don't have that 30 head count, or we don't have the demand, what Claire's giving you is a lifeline and saying, actually, you don't need to have someone full-time, but let them come in and start putting out those small bin fires.
yeah,
So I think that's really powerful. And the second thing that I think it is also good for people to have that idea in their head of like, maybe when it is 30 people, we do want to be thinking about that full time. And even though you might have moved, there is no right time, and as soon as possible and everything,
mm,
I do think some people listening, if they are founders, like they have less experience than you, and you being willing to just share that those practical tips is actually really valuable. So thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, another way I think that, well, to help set that HR person up for success and not failure, it's, deciding very early on where you want HR as a function to sit in your business. Like, is it there, delivery, bringing in hires, making sure there's contracts and a handbook and all the basic things? Or do you want that person? And the answer is yes, you should want that person. Do you want that person to have a seat at the table, to have commercial knowledge and involvement, to help you with your strategy? That is where that person is going to be most valuable to you. They can also do all the other stuff. They will also make sure your paperwork's done. They'll also make sure that your employees are happy and healthy. But they will be able to stay one step ahead of the business if you are bringing them into commercial conversations. And I think that is where we're often set up for failure, is we're not seen as a valuable part to the commercial success of the business.
Yeah, I think that's a really big point, a really powerful point. Like, what changes when we do see HR as valuable commercially for the business?
Well, what changes is that you are bringing in the right people at the right time to help scale and build your product, to make your product successful, to give value back to your investors. Like, none of that can happen without the people to do that. And it is the people function that makes that happen.
And I'm guessing you've had experience in both kinds of worlds, right? Where the people function has had a seat at the table, and where the people
Mm,
hasn't had a seat at the table.
yeah.
You talk through a little bit of what you've seen or experienced through that difference.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I think as my career has advanced, I've learned to be able to kind of walk away from those things where the people function isn't seen as having commercial value. Where I've been in businesses where I haven't had a seat at the table, I am constantly left in the dark. Things are just being thrown over the wall at me and I have to react. That means that I'm not making the right hires at the right time. That means that product delivery is going to slow down. It means that ultimately you're going to hire the wrong people and they will continue to move on. So there is no, historical knowledge being built. You're just churning through and you're ultimately not kind of giving value to your investors. And that is the ultimate goal. Like, as a people function, my customer isn't even the employees. My customer is the investors of those businesses.
Mhm.
That's who I have to deliver to. And without having a seat at the table, without having that longer term knowledge, I can't do that job. I can fill in your contracts, I can type you up a handbook, but that's all I can do.
Yes, and I think for people listening, that might be like a semi jaw-dropping comment that you just said. You're like,
Ooh,
this is my
love
view.
it.
I think it's a powerful statement that you just made, because what changes, and I think a lot of organizations don't see it that way, and it costs them,
Mm,
exactly as you said, longer recruitment cycles, ineffective recruitment, slower product delivery, all of those kind of things. Like, it literally costs the company. So you can see how HR is literally a commercial function. So you explain it,
absolutely.
but what you just shared about, when you see it as a commercial function, then you stop seeing its clients as the employees and you start seeing its clients as the investors. And that puts you in alignment with all the leadership team. So you're
Yeah,
working.
absolutely. When it's done well, it is an amazing feeling as a people leader
Yeah.
because you really, feel that you are personally valued because there is a personal element to it. I want to feel that I am getting fulfillment out of my role, but
Yeah.
you're also seeing the product soar, the business scale at pace. And I mean, that's what keeps me in early stages businesses because when it is done right, you can't get that buzz anywhere else.
Addicting.
It's very addicting.
So what would you say to anyone listening that is like, oh wow, this is really powerful. I buy into this. I'm the HR leader and I want to get a seat at the table and I don't have one. Um, and potentially, but I could, right? Not someone that's like, this would never happen. So, but I could see how, like, how might they position it? How might they approach it? How might they make this case to get themselves a seat at the table when potentially the founders haven't even thought of it? Just like, many people might not have thought of it.
Yeah, I think, you have to, in order to get the seat at the table, you have to demonstrate that you understand the business end to end. Like you really do understand what the product is trying to deliver. Like you have to be able to talk the talk. You don't have to be a finance expert. I mean, I sit in meetings where I have nothing to add in terms of the numbers, but I am actively going out of my way to try and learn that. I think that that is really important. I think that you have to have an ally on that leadership team. If everyone is sat in that team thinking that you as an HR function don't need to be in that room because you can't add value to a conversation about finances or fundraising, then it doesn't matter how great your pitch is, you're just never going to get that seat at that table. You need to have an ally. Ideally, that is the founders of that business, and they should be an ally from day one. But you need to invest in understanding the business outside of the HR function. If you're not willing to invest in that, then you're not going to get that seat at the table. You need to demonstrate that there is value in that function.
Yes, and it's interesting because so one of the things that we spoke about was kind of, you mentioned not being an expert in all areas like employment law and being willing to delegate and being willing
Yeah,
experts and when you let go of what you're genuinely not an expert in, it
gotcha.
the space for you to learn at that leadership level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the best leaders, regardless of whether you're an HR leader or not, are the ones that can admit what they don't know and find the people to solve that problem. And the ones that continue to be curious and want to kind of learn outside of their role. Those for me have been the best founders that I've worked with. And so the same is true of HR leaders. You need to learn and be able to talk the talk. You need to sit in front of an engineering team and get their buy-in, even if you don't know how to write a single line of code. You need to understand what a product roadmap looks like and be able to challenge and question it. So I think that as HR leaders, if they're, listening and want that seat at the table, like no one's going to pull up the chair for you. Like you're going to have to demonstrate that you add value beyond the world of kind of the HR to-do list.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was absolutely so powerful. And that's exactly what I was thinking. You have to be willing to like kind of disappoint some people, right? I
Mm,
was speaking with one of our clients and a HR director, and she was saying how she gets a buzz off being like a really fast email responder. But being that fast email responder means that you are constantly, exactly as you said, in reactive mode and constantly,
absolutely.
you can see the client then has become the employees.
Absolutely. Yeah. No one, if that is how you set yourself up, that will continue. I say this to my people team all the time that like success in our roles isn't about like the number of people that we've brought in. Like success is so much more than that. We have to be able to push back. We have to be able to I mean, argue with other leaders in a healthy way. It doesn't have to be combative. Really good founders are able to kind of sit and listen to other people's opinions. And ultimately, they might not make the decision that you want, but they've got to be able to hear you out. And being able to challenge the founders that I work with is the most important part of my role. And I wouldn't be able to be effective if I wasn't able to do that. As a people function, you can't just say yes, 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 yes all the time. My output is very high, and then so when it drops for a reason, I personally feel a bit anxious about that. Like, well, do people not think I'm good at my role anymore? So yeah, you have to set healthy boundaries because she'll never be able to continue that pace as that business scales.
Yeah, and it was interesting. One of the things that we were discussing was, lots of last minute requests, urgent requests, last minute requests, urgent requests. But it's like, have you exactly as you said, what happens when you say no to one of them?
Yeah.
If you keep saying yes because it's urgent and it's like it's not a non-negotiable, then you keep fueling the narrative exactly like you said. You're not creating those boundaries, and you keep saying, this is the last time, but yes, I can do it. I personally think you are always teaching people how to treat you.
Yes, and you're establishing your function as a service function. Keep throwing the things over the wall at me, and
Mm,
I'll keep reacting to them.
mm,
That's not what a people function is.
mm.
Um, yeah, it's, you're not running a ticketing system. I think that you have to be able to kind of push back and prioritize things that they might think are a burning priority is because they're viewing it through the silo of their own function. You, as a people function, look down and into the business. You are looking across it. You know exactly where all the other priorities are, and it's your responsibility to decide of all of those things coming at you, what are the things that are most important to the commercial success of the business?
Right.
Answering that email straight away isn't.
Yes, yes. And even I would argue, even if it is, right? So I worked in sales in my most recent role, and it was quite understood that we could kind of get away with being a bit last minute because it was commercially viable. It would be prioritized.
Mm,
And I wonder what would have happened if we weren't given that breathing space, how we would have had to show up, right? Like
yeah,
taking responsibility.
yeah.
If it wasn't like, hey, because you're in sales, we'll drop everything last minute for you to get this thing over the edge. Like that's great. And also, is it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, isn't it?
I know, I know. I saw this meme recently, which is like, we're saving PDFs, not lives. And I thought that was like, I thought that was really good. I mean, I used to say all the time, like, we're not saving lives. And then I've spent years working in health technology where I like, I literally can't say that anymore. But the HR function itself is not saving lives. And I think like we can push back and reprioritize and like just give everyone a good healthy dose of a reality check. Like, I think that is the most important thing.
Yes. And there's lots of data actually that shows that HR people are like the most stressed, the most overworked, the most prone to burnout.
Yeah.
I think this is part of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've seen that especially in recent years. And I know you and I spoke about sort of COVID happening and everyone looked to the HR function like we'd been through a global pandemic training or something and we're somehow ready to deliver on this. We hadn't a bloody clue what we were doing either. We were winging it and also managing our own mental health. And I think, when I look back at that time and the amount of times I spent on video checking in on staff, I actually don't remember a single time anyone did the same for me.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't remember a single person actually asking how I was, apart from a candidate I was interviewing. And I thought I had to hold myself together because I actually thought I was going to cry down this video of this candidate because it was the only person who just stopped and said, before we go any further, how are you doing with all of this? And I just was like, oh my God, I'm going to start
mm.
crying through this. I think that we have seen that rapid deterioration of of mental health in people because it is not invested in the same way that it is for the rest of the team. Like, those check-ins from our leaders are just as important. And we take on everyone else's. I personally really struggled with that, leading up to, lockdown. I was going through my own mental health journey. I'd lost a friend to suicide. I was really struggling with it. And then suddenly we were locked down with no support. And I wasn't dealing very well with, therapy online versus therapy in person. And what I was getting was everyone else's mental health concerns and having to, signpost and help them. And because I'd gone through that time of losing someone to their mental health, the first thing on my mind was, this can't happen under my watch as an HR leader. I will fail at my job if this happens again. And then it happened, and I lost a colleague to their mental health. And and that was it. I really struggled to get myself out of that because I'd not only failed as a friend in my eyes, and I've learned to come to terms with that, but I'd failed as an HR leader. I'd let it happen again. And it made me hyper aware to a really unproductive level, so that if anyone was coming to me with a mental health concern, like my nervous system was on high alert because I had to keep that person alive because I'd failed to do it twice. And this is a story that is not just mine, it is many HR leaders. And the best thing that we can do is remind ourselves that it is not our job to keep other people alive. It isn't. I'm not a mental health expert. And I feel myself burning up because I feel nervous that my colleagues will hear me say this and think that that means that I don't care. It's really hard to say that and still say that you care. I do care, but it's not my responsibility to keep you alive and mentally well. It is my responsibility to give you access to those things, but it is not my responsibility to be a mental health practitioner.
But that's it completely. I think that's kind of what we spoke about. Firstly, thank you for sharing. I know we spoke about it before, and I appreciate you sharing here for everyone listening. I think it's very powerful. And a lot of people have probably just taken a deep breath and given themselves permission,
Yeah.
because that is what we're speaking about when we say you are not the expert of everything. You cannot carry all of these things. And as a HR practitioner, you are not trained the same way a mental health practitioner is, and you are not supposed to be. We are not every person in every job is supposed to have the same skills. And when we take responsibility for things that we are not skilled in, of course, it's going to create really unsustainable mental, physical, and even practical in terms of time practices. I don't know why my
I
thumb.
don't know why of all of the topics that suddenly to have a little thumbs up come up was the worst.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
it kind of broke the tension.
Um, but I just think it's such a powerful example of what we're speaking about,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people go into the people function because they care about people. They care, they understand there is an understanding and a value of people that isn't
Mm.
necessarily there in other functions, not intentionally, but just I just think like you are very aware of the value of people. You've spoken about it, even, when you're speaking about the leadership team, about how you have to be considering the people you are bringing on.
Yeah.
And and you cannot be an expert in all the things.
No, I think, one of the great things to come out of COVID was that we got that literal window into people's lives. Like, we were suddenly seeing into people's bedrooms, which was a very strange experience for an HR leader. But that the walls came down, right? There was no barrier there. And we got to have deeper conversations with employees that we maybe wouldn't have had. Those doors have been open and they shouldn't be closed. Like, we shouldn't go back to how things were. We should learn from that experience. But I think that as a people function, you do need to take a bit of an emotional step back from that. We're now, it's in so many workplaces now, we have mental health champions, and everyone does their mental health first aid. And I don't want to sound negative about that because it comes from a really good place. But there is a very, very, very fine line when it comes to mental health first aid between signposting and offering advice. And what often happens is that those individuals veer into the advice offering, and that makes me very nervous. It is not my job to give you mental health advice. It is not any mental health champion in any business's job to give mental advice. It is to point you in the direction for talking therapy. None of these apps where you just click a button to say what smiley face you are for the day. Get people in front of therapists and let them do their job that they are trained to do.
Yes, because you care about people,
Yes.
because you want what's best for them, because you want what's actually going to help them, because you want what's effective for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that came up in our conversation, or just based off of what we've spoken about today, any points that you've not made, or anything that you want people to really take from this episode?
I mean, I think the most important thing to take is that the HR we are human beings as well. Like we need to be able to make mistakes. And something that you and I spoke about before was about being experimental HR leaders. Like the only way that you can experiment is if you are accounting for a high probability of failure, right? You're going to have to burn some things to the ground. And again, I think the way that HR has been set up, CIPD, et cetera, is that there was no room to step outside the box. This is the box that you should sit in. These are the rules, put the rules in place, and that is it. If we want to be great HR leaders with a seat at the table, being involved in strategic decision makings, then we have to operate like a product function does. And a product function makes mistakes. They try things out, they burn things to the ground, they rebuild it. And that is what is going to be a successful people function.
Like, again, I feel like you're just dropping these sentences, and I just have to repeat them to people. HR operating as a product function.
Yes, absolutely.
So powerful. I think it's so revolutionary. I think a lot of people don't think of it that way. And I think you've explained why with that experimentation. I just have to.
Yeah. I mean, in the last couple of years that I've been in the scan team, we've tried lots of different things and then burn it to the ground. And we will keep doing that. It is not, we don't have to be pushing things out at perfect. Push it out at 80% and iterate up the extra 20%.
Yes, yes. I think failing fast, failing forward, like taking the failing, like learning from the failure,
Yeah, absolutely.
achieve a lot more, a lot sooner. And
Yeah, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. I mean, it's a hard job. So
yeah. Amazing. So if you want to connect with Claire on LinkedIn, the link is going to be in the show notes, or even just follow along with all that she's doing with Scan, because she does share quite a bit there. That's how we met. If you know someone that you think would be great on this podcast, then please fill in the link as well, or you can submit yourself. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you enjoy this podcast, it's brand new, please do leave a review or share it with one person that you know will benefit from it. Thanks, Claire, for sharing. I think you shared so deeply across 3 different core areas that this is so valuable. I think, I mean, even for me as a human, human to human, like when I speak to you, it's just that opportunity to just be more human. I told you we don't edit this podcast for the same reason. So thank you for being your most human self here too.
Thank you. That was great. I really enjoyed it.
Amazing. All right. Bye, everyone.